Hey guys, it's Barrett with the Cubic Camper. In our last video, we talked about installing a unowix lithium battery in my friend Tyler's little guy Max. And today what we're going to do is we're going to install a new converter that's lithium compatible to help that battery get the best charge it can get and help them along their way. So stay tuned right after this. Alright guys, so during the install of the unowix battery in the little guy Max, I did notice that the power center, which also contains an integrated converter, was not lithium compatible. The model that came stock in the camper was a WFCO 8735P. I reached out to my friends at WFCO because the informational pamphlet that I found online showed that it did charge at a maximum of 14.4 volts. So I wasn't sure if this was really lithium compatible or not, because that is around the same, voltage that you expect a lithium converter to charge to. Now, they stated that this converter was not designed to work with lithium batteries. They said that it's probably not going to charge the lithium batteries all that great, and it would not charge them fully. As I previously said, standard converters will work with lithium batteries, but they will not charge them fully. They only charge them about 70–80%. So WFCO generously sent me a converter for this project. On the outside, it looks exactly the same as the original one. However, this is the model WF8735AD, which does have the auto detect functionality. So it will automatically detect whether the battery attaches lithium or lead acid, and this is the same technology that's built into the beast of the converter that I have in our rig here. And so I've been very happy with it, and I have a video about that. I'll post that up there if you guys are interested in it. But I've been very happy with it. It charges a lot better than the previous charger that I had, and so I can't say anything bad about it. I mentioned before that I didn't really see the utility in the auto detect feature. However, during this install, Tyler asked me if he ever just decided to go back to a lead acid battery, if the charger would charge that battery. So initially I told him that we'd have to change the converter back, but then I remembered that this does have that auto detect feature, and so it would match the voltage just automatically whether it was a lead acid or a lithium battery. Now, that being said, he's not got to stretch the legs on this lithium battery yet. Once he does that, I don't think that he'll ever have to worry about that one again, because those lithium batteries, in my opinion, it's just miles above the rest. So let's talk about the process of this conversion. Number one, you need to be sure that all the power's off to the camper. That includes, not being plugged into 110, any inverters are off, any 12-volt systems disconnected, either at the disconnect switch or the battery. If you're not sure 100% that all the power's cut off to the panel with the disconnect switch, which a lot of times there are some circuits that are still hot with that, I've just disconnect the battery from the terminal just to be on the safe side, because you don't want any 12-volt power and you don't want any 110-volt power on the system at all when you're doing this. Now, the first step in changing this out is to remove the cover. You remove the outer cover by twisting it so that one end will release on the side, and that exterior cover, which is the door, basically will just pop right off. Then there are 4 screws in the corners which release the outer bezel. Then there are 4 screws that hold the actual unit to the cabinet. So I did have to remove the main ground in order to pull that out. So you have to keep things like that in mind whenever you're doing this. Sometimes there won't be enough slack on the wires. All the rest of the wires were long enough to pull out, but I did have to cut off some zip ties, which we had removed a drawer up above there to give us access to it. So it wasn't an issue at all to get in there and clip those zip ties off. So I want to say that I was pleasantly surprised when I noticed that the factory did label all of the hot wires for the circuits. We were sure to take plenty of pictures. However, you can't really take a picture of how each wire goes in very reliably. So it was nice to have the labels on there. Now, those labels were a little bit loose, so they weren't like taped to the actual wire, and they could just kind of fall off because they were a loop around the wire. And so we just took extra care, a little bit extra effort when we're moving those wires around, not to knock those labels off. because that made the process so much easier to put everything back just like it was on the new converter as it was on the old power center. I will say that changing all those 12-volt leads over was really easy because they were all color coded, and they were color coded on the old power center just the same as the new power center. So all I did was I clipped those wires. I did clip them. I left some of that wire from the old power center there so that it would have the matching color wire, because most of them did have matching wires that they were attached to, but some of them changed the color there. And that way all the colors were the same. I didn't have to worry about it. And then I just used a 12-volt butt connector and some electrical tape to connect all those together. You know, as far as the fuses go, I just moved them over in the same order from the old one to the new one because it's the same exact parts. It's the same colors. Everything's the same. All you gotta do is just move those over. And they do include like the main converter fuse there, but all the rest of the fuses, they needed to be moved from the old power center to this one, or new fuses, but I really don't know why you would do that when you have them all right there. You know, the hardest part about this install is moving the AC loads over to the new power center. We just removed all the grounds from the ground bar and all the neutrals off the neutral bar, but then, you know, we pulled all those hot wires out of the breakers, being very careful again not to mess those labels up that they had on there for us. You know, there was a screw and a piece of metal that held on the main breaker in, so we removed that. And then the breakers were just pulled out by pulling kind of down and out. If you've ever removed a breaker, it's just a normal breaker. And you just pull them out. And then we moved those over to the new power center. I did them one at a time, so again, I didn't have to worry about, did I get this 15, 20 amp breaker in the same slot as I had it in. I did everything one at a time, and so it just went right smooth as butter the way it was supposed to go. Probably the most difficult part was removing the wires with the strain relief. You know, one of those strain reliefs broke off, so I wasn't really sure about that because I never really tried to save one of those, and I was trying to not damage the wire, obviously. So I went over to YouTube University and I searched for a better way. And apparently they have special tools for this, but you can get by, especially for just this limited use, by getting a set of needle nose pliers. You take those pliers and you clamp them around that plastic strain relief from the inside and to compress it. And you might have to twist it a couple of different ways, but usually you can get it to pop out the back after you finagle it for a little bit. Also, try to remember which holes that these wires were in, because a couple of the holes actually had like two separate pieces of Romex going through the same hole, which again, they're still in the strain relief. But if you just pull one out and put it in the new one at the same time, you don't have to worry about keeping up with it because it's all going to be the exact same. Just keep an eye on those labels if you have them with you. If they weren't labeled, then I would label them myself before I took the wires off. I did add a metal strain relief to the main wire because that's the one that the plastic had broke on, and it's what I had on me, so I just used that so we didn't have to run to the store. You know, from here it turns into a little bit of a rat's nest. You know, just remember, get all those black wires back in the breakers where they go, and then make sure that all those connections are tight, and then do all the grounds and all the neutrals. And you know, it's pretty easy to kind of count all those wires and make sure that you have all of the ones there. It might be a little helpful if you want to go the extra mile and just write down when you take them out of the neutral bar how many wires were in the neutral bar and how many wires were in the ground bar, just to make sure that you don't miss anything. You know, this can be a little easier of a process if you kind of get those wires pointed in the right direction, like all the grounds kind of pointed toward the ground bar, all the neutrals kind of pointed toward the neutral bar, all the black wires pointed toward the breakers kind of before you start connecting anything, because sometimes it just gets a bit of a pain because all those wires kind of, you know, running around each other, and they're hard to do that kind of after you start hooking stuff up. You know, lastly, when you're putting it back in the cabinet, be sure to run that main ground cable back through the plastic there, connect that back to the ground bar, because you know that's the one that wasn't long enough to be able to pull out of the cabinet. So you want to make sure that that's hooked up, or all those ground bars aren't doing you any good, because they're not hooked to any grounds other than the bar, which, you know, that ground bar has to be connected to the ground or it's not really helping. Then all you got to do is replace the screws and mount it back to the cabinet, and then replace the bezel screws. So then you want to plug your camper in, you know, have the battery hooked up, and kind of test all those loads one at a time, make sure that everything's working, make sure you didn't miss anything. You know, during testing, it did show that it was charging initially at 20 amps. And we'll have to test this out a little bit more. I did tell Tyler to be sure to drain the battery down, and because that, you know, is the biggest thing that I've saw about this auto detect feature, is if you don't drain the batteries all the way down a time or two, sometimes it doesn't kick over, and so it doesn't use those charging parameters for the lithium batteries. You know, our next project on the Little Guy Max is going to be install a 1500 watt pure sine wave inverter. And we're also still kind of working on a fix for the solar charging as well. So stay tuned for future updates as we plan on testing the system out. You know, just got to stretch your legs a little bit, get more in tune with this, and we can give you a better, you know, review at that point on the converter, a better review on the battery, see how everything's working out. I think it's going to be great. And thanks for watching this video. Thanks for being part of the family.
Do not forget to hit that subscribe button.